Hello everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So today is another one of our dev talks. We're going to be going through the current development progress of Q and the broader ecosystem, and also talk about some interesting events in the industry. As always, a quick disclaimer, the discussion today is not a solicitation for investment and is not financial advice. The Quill and corresponding wrapped Quill tokens discussed on this broadcast, as well as any other tokens we discussed on this broadcast, are utility tokens, and Quilibrium Inc. does not endorse or encourage engaging in speculation on the utility token of the network. With that out of the way, as always, we also talk about the mission. The mission of Q is to secure every bit of traffic on the internet, whether Q native, other decentralized protocols, or the broader web itself. The ways we do this are through native secure applications on Q and development tools for them, API-compatible tooling so people can come from all walks of life, including the classic Web 2 world, and finally, enhancing the privacy of other protocols. Today's agenda is going to be relatively short compared to some of our more recent talks. It'll probably cap out after about an hour, making some room for some quick Q&A. We'll talk about business updates, dev updates, and then, like I said, recent industry events. Business updates. ZapMe is very proud to announce that ZapMe Social is now decentralized. Their storage has now moved entirely onto Q Inc. And they are also planning on moving other sources or other parts of their infrastructure onto Q as we start to release these different features of the Q console and associated Q web services. Development updates. As far as releases go, we had a node update. We've also had a few back and forth runs with the App Store approval process. It's been a massive pain in the ass, but the finish line is finally here. And we're also going to be releasing the same update, begrudgingly, to TestFlight and Google Play Beta, and of course the standalone APK for people sideloading. We also made some updates to 3 major Q services. We'll talk about that in a few moments. Hypersnap, some updates specifically around Klearu, and then MegaRPC. Talking about things that are in flight. So 21022 was what just went out earlier this month. It had bug fixes around the TUI, an activity eviction bug fix, a seniority merge bug fix, and some heavy bandwidth bug fixes. As for 21023, which a lot of people are waiting very eagerly for, this one's a very interesting release in the 210 series. In particular, it was mostly a big deep dive. We were going through pprof and memory profiling outputs to find what was causing some of the issues we were experiencing. The biggest of issues we were seeing was around the Blossom sub. Basically our pub sub layer was dropping messages because message processing loop kept hanging. And it was hanging at really odd intervals, and it was really hard to trace down until we started to dive into like the deep profiling through pprof, and it actually revealed Blossom sub wasn't the only thing dropping messages. We were seeing resource access halts on our PCs basically for the same reason, and also the submission layer from nodes submitting on those RPCs. And that kind of led something that I had been trying to kick the can down the road on about for a while, and forced us to come to a very important conclusion. Namely, Go's GC is absolute dog shit. The tricolor mark and sweep algorithm they use is very outdated. No other language uses it anymore for a reason, and it's because that stop the world behavior causes all sorts of weird behaviors to crop up, especially in lower resourced machines. And every single time we've tried to fight this, we've fought it many times through the history of the protocol. We fought it through our implementation of BLS 48581. We fought it through the implementation of our verifiable delay function, the Veselovsky VDF. We've fought it through basically every part of the crypto stack itself. Everything has been moved to Rust on that. And the reason is because ultimately these things churn through a lot of memory, and they have really tight bounds around how much memory is being used, to the point where if you're not manually managing the memory, or the language handles it for you, you basically find yourself stuck in deep performance rabbit holing and lots of weird unsafe code that you have to do. And inevitably the conclusion always ends up Go. Stop using Go. And for the longest time I've been wanting to avoid that because frankly the state of some of our other dependencies, Pebble or libp2p, had a lot to be desired with respect to compatibility for Rust versus Go. In particular, Pebble itself, of course, is a Go native implementation of RocksDB, or at least it was, until they decided to start tacking features on it that made it incompatible. And so naturally, we were trying to avoid this for the longest time, but ultimately, every single path we took kept leading us to the same place. So we reached the conclusion that we had to rewrite it in Rust. And so this isn't something that just happened spur of the moment from 2.2 to 2.3. There's actually a lot of pieces of the protocol that have been rewritten in Rust for quite some time. Around .18, when we started rolling out the services like QNS and special features on Quorum Mobile and some of the advanced work we were doing with proving and trying to support other networks integrating in, all of those things ended up getting written in Rust anyway, and we had Rust implementations of those corresponding services. And so a lot of the overhead that would have come into place with having to do such a rewrite was basically already done for us. The only things that were really missing was converting the data over to RocksDB, which is trivial. It's a very easy thing to do. And also the overall work of worker management and all of that. But a very interesting realization comes into view when you think about why we did things the way we did with the worker management and having separate processes for non-clustered instances. And ultimately it was because Go was giving us so much grief. We couldn't pin cores to single threads. The Go GC basically fought us every step of the way on anything like that. And so we had to create a multi-instance model where you would run either the node in the master mode, which is managing all the workers and handling global level proofs, or the workers themselves individually had to be capped at certain amounts of memory. And it still grew grotesquely out of control because once you hit that ceiling that was set on those workers would then stop the world to do their own GC. And that just is a huge pain in the ass. So naturally, when we moved to Rust, that actually made it quite simple to relax a lot of those things, because at that point you could actually have a single process that's managing all the individual worker threads when it's in non-clustered mode. But of course, we do have all the compatibility considerations to keep in mind for people who are running clusters, for people who are using the proxy pub/sub mode, all of those things. So we scoped it specifically to the node. QClient is still in Go. We're not migrating that just yet. A lot of the corresponding libraries that we have created are one-to-one compatible, so people who are building tooling around Go are completely fine. Like they're unaffected by this. It is strictly just the node. Next up is MegaRPC. We've finally released it. Last session we were talking about it, and it was on the cusp of being released, but it's now been released. It's a privacy-preserving RPC. It uses ORAM-based queries for user privacy. We've been talking to some wallet teams about integrating it so that they can ditch some of the public RPC providers that are charging out the ass and also give no privacy at all, and in fact cooperate with different government bodies across the world providing user information. MegaRPC can't do that. It's the first RPC service that can't be evil, and we will be opening up QConsole access for teams that want to get API keys and integrate with MegaRPC themselves if they don't wish to run a MegaRPC node itself. Understandable, it costs a lot in terms of overall data storage. And we're going to get into an interesting note about this later in the talk, and I'll explain why in a bit. QNS is also getting a bump with support for messaging sellers and owners, and it will have direct integration with Quorum Mobile. We're going to give a little bit of a demonstration of Quorum Mobile's update pretty shortly in this talk. But right now it's going through the App Store approval process, and some people have asked, they've asked before, I'm going to say it again just because I want to make sure people are, wherever they're coming in to learn about this, they all have the same information. So this App Store approval process, obviously it's a big pain. They have a lot of policies on social apps. Social apps probably have the most intense amount of scrutiny, and part of that involves things like reporting or things like whether or not adult content is the focus of the app, and if it is, it won't be approved. That's not an issue for us, but these are things that have to be kept in mind, and boy howdy are those rules that you have to actually comply with, very Byzantine in nature. But importantly, Quorum Mobile has gone through a serious UI overhaul. It has a space explorer. We just absolutely ground out every single performance issue, so it's significantly faster. Everything around encryption and decryption has been moved into a background native thread. We moved all of that into native code instead of the sling, or I guess they call it a trampoline, that back and forth with the JavaScript thread. We don't do that anymore. It's just strictly native for all cryptography related things, including talking to the overall network in order to obtain messages and stuff. So it massively improved the performance. We also did a deep dive on the overall performance of React Native apps in general and fixed a lot of the things that could have been memoized when they weren't, and so on. It had support for public profiles, so if you want to share your profile publicly and you want people to like see information like a profile picture and whatnot, you can now do that. Supports voice and video calls. And one thing that wasn't noted before, one of the things that some people notice when they're coming into Quorum Mobile from the Q ecosystem and they don't have any familiarity with Farcaster or don't know how to get in it, don't want to bother with that, we're actually going to add free Farcaster account onboarding. So with the update, you will have the ability to create a new Farcaster account, and it will be pretty seamless in terms of that interaction. It's not the two split world views that it has been. Now, I want to note, a lot of this also changes the nature of how the protocol itself, like the Quorum layer, interacts with the app. And so by consequence, we've been trying to avoid having to do basically what I call two upgrades. When you get an app through the App Store that was previously on test flight, I don't know if Google works the same way because I haven't really messed around with Android as much as I have with iOS. It basically lives in two separate worlds. Like when you have an account on a test flight based app, you have to actually manually log in to the new app on the App Store. And that same thing comes into play with, yeah, thanks for the spam. Anyway, that same thing comes into place when you are doing things like crypto wallets or network integrations. All these things that store data locally on the app now has to migrate over. And doing that is a serious pain, and we only wanted to incur that pain once. But with this update, there is a little bit of upgrade pain. So if you are on test flight and you're not waiting for the App Store release, you will have to go basically through two upgrades. Trying to minimize the pain as much as possible so it looks as seamless as it can be, but unfortunately that is the reality of it. Now, give me a second while I'm trying to get rid of this. Why isn't it letting me do it? Weird. This is very annoying, sorry. There we go. Okay. Yeah, if you wanna spam your scam links on Twitch or Twitter, I'm gonna get rid of that. Anyway, the last thing is that, of course, like I said, being able to message sellers and owners of QNS names, but more importantly, be able to receive offers for QNS names directly on Quorum Mobile. That's the last major feature that'll be in this update. I'm actually going to pull it up real quick so that folks can see what I'm talking about. You can see that it's been redesigned. This one is running iOS 17. This one's on 22.6. So you can see the liquid glass treatment on iOS 26. It also, as you can see, I am very lazy with my testing. I just post random things instead of whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and issue a call. Now, I don't have audio on, so the audio is not going to go through, but you can see how the call proceeds and, you can accept the call and it'll do that. But one thing that is really cool, and this is actually a thing we're going to be supporting through QConsole as well. These calls are actually being routed through the onion routing layer of the network. So one of the things that tends to happen in a lot of video calls and audio call based apps. Discord is different because they have a hub and spoke model where the hub is Discord servers, so users don't see each other's IPs. But in standard WebRTC, you're actually routing through a connection. Sometimes it's through basically a turnstile server that's routing the traffic for you between two parties, especially when both people are behind residential ISPs. But there's a lot of information leakage. And the biggest thing, of course, about Quorum is that we don't like information leakage and we prevent it at every possible angle. And so Quorum is actually using the onion routing layer of the Quilibrium network to produce this call so that users are not actually revealing where they are in the world, what their IP address is, or anything like that. But at the same time, because it's using the key-based authentication that Quorum has baked in, you know that you are talking to that user authentically. Now I'm going to also show the spaces. You can see some example spaces here. Our Space Explorer will let you access a bunch of public spaces that users have made public. I should note that when you make a space public, it's done through settings. You go over to the danger section and, well, I need to fix the spacing there apparently on an iPhone 15 Pro, but you can submit it to the Explorer so that people can access it publicly. Similarly, all the rest of the app has had a visual overhaul. The mini apps view is obviously still the mini apps view front and center. Wallet roughly the same as before, but this section works a bit better on smaller mobile devices, and of course your profile remains where it has always been. Okie dokie, QStorage. One important thing that came up under some companies, what they need is sub-account ownership. And so when you upload a file to QStorage, when it's a non-public bucket, the write key is owned specifically by your account. The read key is accessible only to your account. And when you make it public, you're essentially revealing the read key for that bucket. The same thing happens at sub-account levels, but what's really nice about it is that it lets you compartmentalize the ownership such that the policy document that you create, you can attach to that sub-account so that you don't have root access. And so this can be really important in security posture. If you're wanting to create a social app, for example, where users are posting images and you only want to have an image that's accessible to those that the users have specifically granted permission to, when you're using AWS-style APIs, that's kind of hard to do. You at least have the risk that the root account owner could view those images. And so by using sub-accounts with that appropriate policy doc in place, that gives you the optionality to upload files that are explicitly controlled only by the user of that account, which can be, in this case, the actual account owner on that social media application. That's a really powerful tool because it gives you the ability to have compartmentalized access controls that are cryptographically enforced without having to actually write all that code yourself. And so the value add is immense. Like, it makes it so easy to create a decentralized app with data stored on the Quilibrium network where the only people who can access that data are the people that the user specifically gives permission to. QKMS got an update as well with sub-account ownership and our new SDK. If you've ever used a wallet as a service style SDK like Privy, you'll feel right at home, especially because we made the API surface basically drop-in compatible. Instead of Privy provider, it's QKMS provider. But it's basically the same thing, but we support a lot more keys. And so how that plays out is you're able to actually create a wallet on the fly, and it's doing the MPC in the background. So you can see how quick the DKG is. It takes a couple of seconds, and now you have a split 2 of 2 threshold signing key. And you can even go to the extent of doing a simple message sign for this example, but it has the full wallet provider in the SDK, so you're able to use all the other integrations you've always used. So if you use VM for Ethereum, or you use any of the wide variety of Solana-based SDKs out there, you can readily create keys that are 2 of 2 or T of N, whatever configuration you want, which is actually really powerful when you're doing group wallets. So being able to create a group wallet, you can actually have all the participants be in browser or in an embedded application in React Native. One other important thing, which I don't think any wallet as a service style SDK offers, is we have support for other keys like BLS 12.381. And what's nice about BLS 12.381 is this is the validator key for Ethereum. So if somebody's wanting to do a group wallet to manage the rewards of a Ethereum validator, you can actually do this programmatically now without having to do multi-sig operations or crazy UIs. You can actually just bake it in using the QKMS SDK. And obviously we have support for BLS 48.581 for Quilibrium, decaf 448 for Quilibrium, and ED 448 for Quilibrium. Okay. Getting back to other things that have been updated, Klearu has expanded classifier model support, so it now can do MPC identification of images. So if you want to provide support for a, for example, say you're building a, I know this one tends to be a popular one in the cryptography community, never understood why, but say you're building a bird watching app and you want to verify that users are contributing authentic photos of birds. You can use the expanded classifier model support to actually identify whether or not the photo is of a bird versus anything else and weed out any submission before any image content has actually been uploaded. This is also useful in the general context for social media so that you can handle situations where things like strict liability content are being uploaded. Also, our LLM model has been expanded to support more multimodal modes, so you can do image submission to a LLM and ask it questions about the content of the image. Also, MetaVM. So MetaVM has gone through a few smaller updates. This week we're going to be launching the public access to FFX, which is our equivalent to AWS Lambda. It'll support being able to run things like Node.js applications, and it has, our next update to it is going to support full EVM to consensus proofs, and you can see the rough model of what that looks like here, considering that presently we're just at layer 1. We support execution proofs, but now we're going to take it all the way up to the consensus layer where you can actually have a full proof of finality where the overall economic security is factored in. And I want to get into why we're doing this and why this is important. Normally I don't talk about updates like these because they get really deep in the weeds of the underlying cryptography, and that tends to be a bit of a high overhead to understanding. But something really rubbed me the wrong way this week with recent events. In fact, you've probably heard about it. So getting into, oh, actually, sorry, one more thing. Balance was released. We have a link to it on GitHub. Free to experiment with. Very excited to see what people make with it. It is the first communicating sequential processes language that actually enforces the constraints of a communicating sequential process language with codified laws as part of its language, which is really helpful for avoiding some of the traps that come into play with building distributed systems. Oh, also Hypersnap. We've had a few releases that have come out. We added support for running nightly builds. We added expanded API compatibility, so you can now do webhooks and notification support, and also released our preview of the Snap Compute and Emulator. You can see it's related to FIP21 in the Hypersnap repo. And of course, there is a token coming around with this. More details go over to the Hypersnap dev calls where we talk about that. So industry events. Over the past week, Vercel was attacked and had a global account compromise. They're kind of trying to play damage control right now about the level of access, but currently on the dark web, people are trying to broker account information for all the users of Vercel, credentials, API keys. Basically, it was one of the worst case scenarios. And the verdict is that this all could have been prevented with whole account isolation, which is why we're really excited to get FFX out there, because we support Node.js applications and we don't have the same kinds of problems around egress fees or even the account separation problem that struck Vercel. So very excited to this for this coming out. It's going to be a pretty big deal for Node.js devs, along with other developers that utilize Lambdas on AWS. Another industry event, eth.limo, their DNS account was compromised on EasyDNS. It was redirected to an attacker-controlled name server. CowSwap was also hit by this, and you could really just avoid this. Right now, DNS is kind of a clusterfuck. It's old. It doesn't have quite the same degree of control or proofs that exist in things like QNS. And with Quorum Mobile hitting the App Store, users will be able to access clear web resources as well as private resources on Q using QNS, which gives you a much greater degree of proof of what you're accessing and also limiting the amount of information that you're giving with those resources that you're accessing via QNS. But the real one, the biggest one that really caught my eye, and this is what I was talking about with MetaVM, Layer 0 gave a rundown of what they currently know with the compromise that happened with a given DAO that basically had consequential damages that spanned all the way to Aave. They made this statement in their report, and this really rubbed me the wrong way. They specifically said, as a result of this manipulation, the Layer 0 Labs operated distributed validator network instance confirmed transactions that never in fact took place. RPC verification is a fundamental limitation of all off-chain services, including bridges, exchanges, etc. We share these learnings to help the industry learn and adapt to these novel attack vectors. Let's talk real quick about how that actually happened. Layer 0 uses RPCs as part of the deviance in order to confirm transactions. The way that they did this was they had a few different RPCs that they essentially load balanced, and I don't know if they actually used it as true validation, like a T of N style consensus, because from their own report, they noticed that 2 of their RPCs had been basically DDoSed offline, and one RPC that returned this malicious transaction was compromised. This one RPC, all of these RPCs apparently were run by Layer 0, but this one RPC appears to have been compromised by Lazarus Group and was actually sophisticated enough that it was giving different answers based on what was querying that RPC. This is unsurprising that, the sophistication of a Lazarus attack, that's what they do, like that's their entire bread and butter. That's not surprising. But what's surprising to me about this is their claim that RPC verification is a fundamental limitation of all off-chain services. That is false. That is 100% false. That is the biggest crock of bullshit I have ever heard from a security report, and Layer 0 is blatantly lying to you. RPC verification is one way to do things. It is a wrong way to do things. It's understandable to use it as a way to easily integrate one of your services with broader on-chain applications. But the problem is, if you are simply trusting an RPC, even when you're running yourself, if you don't actually have proof of execution, if you don't have proof of inclusion in the chain, if you don't follow through to that proof and verify it, that is your fault. That is not the fault of the RPC. That is not the fault of a fundamental limitation. That is a fundamental failing. And so one of the things that I think about, because I used to work at Coinbase, and I'm not doing it to name drop, but we actually cared a lot about the nature of how application compromise can happen. And one of those things is having an isolation model that allows us to ensure that, in order to even compromise a surface in the first place, you have to go through a lot of different surface areas. But beyond that, we actually ran nodes. We didn't just have an RPC service that was standalone. We actually ran legitimate Ethereum nodes. And that gave us access to information, and we would index on top of it in order to actually have the information that we needed. But if you go back to how we're doing MetaVM, we're doing full zero-knowledge proofs presently at the execution layer. The next update is going to be EVM to consensus. And what that means is that when a transaction is being queried through MetaVM, you will be able to actually see the full chain of custody proof that shows not only was the execution valid in that particular block, and you can have the full proof, the zero-knowledge proof that condenses the Merkle-Patricia tree proof of that transaction and all the SLOAD and SStore events that happen on the EVM, but it moves all the way up through to the actual block that's produced, and then the binding at the consensus layer, and then the epoch level finality guarantees based on the FFG, which is basically saying 2/3 of total stake or more has attested to this. So you'll have a full condensed proof based on the full economic security of Ethereum to confirm that that transaction actually happened. And at this point, given the degree of technology that exists today and being able to do this, doing anything else is absolutely irresponsible. You missed 25 minutes. Don't worry. There's recordings. You'll be able to see them on Twitter, Twitch, and I believe Lamat's going to upload them to YouTube. I don't know if he's still doing that or not, but there's definitely lots of ways you'll be able to watch a recap. Can Lazarus ever be a threat to Quill? Oh, they most certainly can be a threat. That's the nature of the beast. When you think about security from a protocol perspective, you're assuming that, one, people won't play by the rules. Okay. You can build the rules so that they're resilient, and you're verifying that, this data is actually valid, that these transactions actually happened. You build in rules that confirm that, double spends can't occur based on the nature of how the protocol works, all the way out to Bitcoin, which is a, probabilistic outcome based on the amount of blocks that have been built up that gives you the degree of confirmation, or on proof of stake networks, like I said, where you use the economic security as the guarantee. But when you're talking about the type of threat actors that exist at that level, they're going after the weakest chain in the link. And sometimes that's not the protocol. In fact, it's not the protocol. Oftentimes, they're going for other things. In the layer 0 case, they attacked an RPC server. In previous cases, they compromised signing front ends for multi-sig signers. They compromised the safe UI by replacing the safe UI with a custom one that used, I don't remember which exchange it was at this point, but they compromised the exchange's instance of that safe front end so that they could replace the transaction that was sent to the ledgers, which for cold storage is so insane to me, but whatever. They're very sophisticated. And they will use anything at their disposal. So if it's not the protocol, they'll go for the operating system. They'll burn a 0 day if they can find one. If they can't do that, they'll go for another dependency in the chain. They'll try and compromise vendors that are dependencies of the application itself. They'll try and break into somebody's account on a domain host. These are all things you have to keep in mind, and it's a lot to keep in mind. It's impossible for any one person to keep this all in their head. And so in order to prevent these styles of attacks, you have to do deep defense in depth. That means in the case of, like, for example, how we do our bridge. Our bridge is an MPC trustless bridge and is being upgraded to use MetaVM as part of that trustless bridge so that we can avoid some of the problems that come into play with RPCs. But most importantly, it is a T of N style confirmation. It cannot be a singular node that is compromised to obtain access to actually minting out ERC20s on the other end or authorizing the dispersal of the token on the network side, on the Q network side. These are things that you have to just build. You have to actually build out the layers of defense in depth. And if you don't, one, you'll get hit. Two, you're not thinking this through enough. And so could they ever? I don't know. I mean, the reality is that, everyone's a target. And with the amount of, work that is coming out from the AI companies out there, the degree of threat modeling has now expanded from nation state to anybody with access to a sophisticated enough model, enough time. Basically, you're trading compute for security at this point, which is kind of funny because, all this stems back to the original thesis of proof of work being the only viable model, and we agree. But that's just the reality of it, and we have to constantly stay ahead of the curve. But that's basically it for the development recap. Like I said, Balance is available on GitHub so you can access it. The QKMS SDK was also published. You can find it on, okay, there it is. You can find it at Quilibrium Network /QKMS SDK on GitHub. The examples should give you plenty of easy ways to get started with it and start building really cool distributed MPC-based wallets. I'm going to go ahead and hop into a few different places where this stream is live so that I can actually get an idea of the questions that are being posted. I just had Twitch open, so let me take a quick look. HM or QM, technically both. I will also note we have had a really bad problem on Twitter lately. There's been a lot of people posting misleading links trying to claim that there's a mint. What I find especially alarming in the ones that I've been reporting recently is that obviously their account names are garbage. They have these weird misspellings of Quilibrium. But what I find really alarming is that they're using the Twitch short links, and somehow, I don't know how they're doing it, but they're taking advantage that the short links don't actually tell you the real URL. And so they are showing a different URL that is rendering in the tweet as quilibrium.com. So if you see a link that we have posted on our account, feel free to always double check that and go to quilibrium.com itself. While we obviously have all the security practices in place that we're supposed to for securing an account, obviously Twitter has had its own issues, and accounts that appear to have been following all those conventions have been completely taken advantage of. The account's been taken over, posting all sorts of crap. So do not trust links on Twitter. It just is, it is an unfortunate reality. They are not telling you the truth. Even if it says quilibrium.com, it might not be. So please, please, please be careful. I also want to note another thing real quick because we get asked it about once a week. If you're using Telegram and you've been invited to a group that looks like any of the known Quilibrium community or Quilibrium node runner groups, they're talking, almost every single time they're saying the same thing, talking about a wallet migration. There is no wallet migration. Do not follow their links. They are lying to you. Report that group. You will lose all of your funds. For the love of God, please. Okay, those are the questions on Twitter and Twitch. Let me check real quick. Okay, nothing on Discord. Let me check the Telegram real quick. Cool, nothing there. So I'll pop back into Twitch real quick to see if there's any remaining questions, and if not, then I guess we'll close it out 20 minutes early. I'll give it a few more minutes so people can have a chance. Oh, one last thing I want to note. The .23 branch is going to be published as soon as humanly possible. Like I said in the various chats, we're working through basically every deployment scenario that we've seen people doing to make sure that this just works. Obviously, a full node read-write sounds insane, but since there wasn't that much to actually move over, it's easy. Nevertheless, easy doesn't mean perfect, and so we're trying to preempt a lot of the tester feedback that we usually run into by just going through all those scenarios ourselves. Doesn't mean we'll get everything, but it means that we'll at least be coming into this testing phase with a lot more confidence that we got a lot of the issues at hand. And why is Twitter doing this? I'm trying to... There we go. Oh, any new BD calls win surprise. Oh, okay, actually there's a question before that, and then I'll get to the BD stuff. Speaking of Quill Network, what's our rule of thumb when to use RPC versus Blossom Sub? So part of the reason we moved some things to RPC instead of Blossom Sub was particularly down to two reasons. One, because we were seeing messages dropping, now we know why. And two, because at the end of the day, a mesh publication-based network, when you have a limited number of nodes that are responsible for a given shard of the network, has its faults where people can try to do all sorts of fun types of Eclipse-style attacks, and we've seen plenty of them. Right now, one of the things that 23 is doing is highlighting peers that are incorrectly reporting themselves as a certain type of peer, like they're reporting themselves as archive nodes at the global level. And it may just be that somebody's misrunning the node or whatever, but nevertheless, we have a lot more alerting in place around it. But these problems that come from mesh-style attacks happen explicitly because of the nature of how the individual committees are essentially formed from the individual shards that are being supported. And so the RPC-based approach essentially like cuts off that problem entirely. It basically moves the problem into a, like protecting the RPC directly, which is like, that node operators are going to have to obviously contend with the fact that people will try to DDoS them. People will try to do all sorts of things. And that's ultimately a node management problem instead of a overall network problem. So RPCs are beneficial for that. Blossom Sub is particularly useful for wide dissemination of content that is basically permissionless and distributed across the entire set. So things like peer info, key registry, these are messages that are easy to route through and ensure that they land in the right places, which is literally everyone, which solves some of that problem. As far as any new BD calls, obviously, like, we're taking calls all the time. Like, I don't know if everyone's noticed this, but I'm sure some people have noticed it because they pointed out that I've been less active in socials and less active in chats, and it's because I've just been so freaking heads down with meetings. The reality is that, like, we can't talk about the outcomes of those calls until it's time. But yeah, we're constantly doing BD calls. We're talking with wallet teams. We're talking with distributed app builders. We're talking with Farcaster client developers. We're talking with all sorts of teams and all sorts of domains. And obviously with Hypersnap, some of that is all going to kind of just like come out once. And then, subsequent publications thereafter. But like the big thing with Hypersnap is a lot of that will be an all at once. With some of our other services, it's going to depend. And not everyone's going to want to identify that they're running on Q. They may just want to simply say that they're now decentralized without much additional information. Everyone's got their own threat models. Everyone's got their own risk profile. It's kind of tough to say. Okay, I will do one last check on Twitter and that'll close things out. Oh, what about ducks? I don't know. What about ducks? Duck facts? Is that beer? No, no. I don't drink. This is a Bang. Bang Energy has kind of been a meme for me because of how much I used to drink it back in the day. I still do. It's just harder to get a hold of. But yeah, no, I don't drink. I've actually been sober for almost, oh crap, I'm coming up on 10 years. Cool. I think this about wraps things up. So, as always, you can find us on our socials. You can find me on Farcaster at Cassie. You can also find me as Cass on Mars in some variant, pretty much anywhere. I know there's a few other people that also have that username, so I mean, be wary, like verify first. But yeah, happy to chat always. And so yeah, I will see you all on the next call or on socials. All right, bye everybody.